My first hour with the Aberration Analyst demo was confusing. In a good way, though. This is the kind of game where learning the rules is the core of the experience. It is the glue that holds it together as a game. Aberration Analyst is a logic puzzle with roguelike elements. Each session is meant to take an hour or two, and you are going to fail. Potentially a lot, as I did in my first go at it. But even with failure, I was hooked by the loop. Check the tabloids, search police records, send out a crew, and hope they find something and come back alive. You are the bureaucrat in this equation, responsible for finding leads and budgeting staff and sending the right people for the job. The budget of your secretive agency is the measure of success or failure. Either you find every aberration, or you run out of money trying. And believe me, that money goes fast. There are only 5 types of supernatural aberrations you are hunting, so you'd think it would be easy to track and identify what any given one must be. But there is a surprising amount of difficulty in nailing down not only where events are happening in the broader map, but what they imply about the location of the underlying cause. There may be signs of a werewolf in a nearby forest, but figuring out what town they secretly live in so you can deal with the situation is the core puzzle. Some aberrations move, and you need to figure out how to track them, so you send in the right expert at the right place at the right time. I had multiple full team wipes when I failed to take appropriate precautions or recognize the signs. The game is unforgiving, but that's also part of the point. You are learning more and more with every failure, in more ways than one. A key component of the formula is the lore books. These are the only thing that persist across your multiple attempts. As you send agents out to explore the villages and towns, they will come back with intel that gets added to the pages. This is how you discover the rules of the world and recognize some of the more hidden patterns within it. While some are overly vague or don't give you a lot to work with, others were vital to me piecing together the location I was looking for. It is a good way to carry progress between your runs. And for me, it really built the world into a living thing that existed outside of the game's desk-based setting. I found Aberration Analyst to be incredibly charming. The 1-bit visual style reminded me immediately of The Return of the Obra Dinn, a game often praised for its aesthetic, and Schmidt Workshops, who made and published this game, did a great job at giving it a really distinct and clear visual feel. From the moment I launched it, I was transported back in time by the old technology on the desk and how the game presented itself. The sound design is also minimal, doing just enough to ground you in the setting and make you slightly uneasy. Less is more in this case, and I think it further draws you into the mindset of a regular desk clerk doing your daily tasks and research. You just happen to be looking for monsters. If any of this has appealed to you, I highly encourage you check out the demo, or just go straight for purchasing the game. It is only $5, and there's a lot to enjoy if you are a fan of logic puzzles like I am. I went back to play multiple sessions of the demo across several days, spotting patterns I had missed before, and learning how to better budget my staff and resources as I searched the sleepy hamlets for aberrations. That's not to say it's a perfect experience. I do have some notes on what I would maybe adjust to make it closer to that. First, some of the randomly generated elements muddy the water a bit too much. For example, one of the police reports was for, quote, gang-related activity, but the town's population was so small I had trouble believing that could be true. So I took it as a potential sign of the supernatural. It felt like a plausible cover-up for some mysterious violence that could have occurred. I was unfortunately wrong, wasting around $7,000 of my budget in the process. This isn't a huge deal, as I did still learn something from my mistake, but it felt like I was being too clever for the game in that moment, which is a disappointment in a logic-based game. You want to feel in step with the game's reasoning, not like it failed to account for something you did. I had some similar missteps with the tabloid headlines, but it's easier to forgive those when the point is their unreliability. We all know the reputation that kind of media has, and the game plays with it well by making that how you are forced to find your first leads. I do think the randomly generated aspects start to fall down here a bit, though. It did not take me long to recognize the syntax pattern that every headline had. Newton pilot sees monster during football game. Popular zookeeper haunted by ghost in backyard. South Mound mathematician found bloodless after sunset. They all just kind of sound the same. Even the funnier headlines like, unwell waitress comforts mayor in friend's shed, lost their charm a bit, and I think that's to the game's detriment. Whatever is generating the headlines just needs a bit more variation, 4 or 5 more distinct sentence structures that it can plug the random components into, so that they don't accidentally pull you out of the setting. Something else that annoyed me a bit was having to send a full team of 5 investigators every time. Why can't I send a smaller scouting party of 2 or 3 just to interview townspeople and get the lay of the land? Instead, you are put into an all-or-nothing kind of situation when you send a team. Either they find something and it's maybe enough to cover the costs of sending them, or they don't, and you've just wasted a large chunk of whatever budget you have left. By the end of my first attempt, I was losing money even when they found lore or clues due to the high operating costs of the missions. When the only reliable thing you have to go on is very vague police and coroner reports, it's easy to feel like you are shotgunning the map a bit just looking for anything that might be a more solid lead. That's another place where a bit more variety would be appreciated. I got the same hint about a bloodied handkerchief 5 times on my first playthrough, and it was just such an obvious indicator that I was dealing with a vampire. I would rather there be multiple types of more vague evidence for each aberration, something that wouldn't be outrageously difficult given there are only 5 of them. I think something adjacent to how a game like Phasmophobia has the different detection tools that work together to reveal the entity you're dealing with would work well here, so you aren't just looking for the same thing over and over. Maybe I just got unlucky and there is more variance than I saw across my attempts, but it stood out to me, so I figured it was worth mentioning. I should also mention that I did have an immediate tech issue when I first launched the game. It opens in a fairly small window, so I went to the settings to change the size. There are 3 presets for size that were all still significantly smaller than my monitor, as well as a full screen mode that isn't really full screen so much as just being the largest of the other options with a black background everywhere else. When I first messed with these settings, the game kind of freaked out, and I had to completely kill it and relaunch to try again. I couldn't recreate it, but it wasn't the best first impression. Maybe it's just my tester's luck. I have a habit of unintentionally breaking these kinds of things. Despite those complaints, the game was very enjoyable. My first time succeeding at an objective felt a bit like I was throwing stuff at the wall to see what stuck. I way overspent by sending extra specialists, and I was dancing around the epicenter of the incidents a bit, but it still felt pretty good. I was a little surprised at how sudden success was. Just kind of going, oh, I guess I got it. The second time, I knew better what I was looking for and what I needed to do. I was pretty confident, put together my team while being mindful of who I should send in case this was the spot, and it paid off. I was figuring out the logic behind the puzzle, and it felt really good to nail it, to have learned from my prior successes and failures. It's a special kind of rush when a puzzle clicks, and while I don't know if the rules are cut and dry enough for that to be totally reliable here, it was the appropriate level of satisfying. It felt earned, and that satisfaction is what has made me come back for several more attempts already. As I said, I would recommend checking it out if this is your style, even if I'm unsure how much deeper the complexity goes. There's an imaginary version of this game where you have to trawl through Old Town records for signs that corroborate the police reports and send multiple waves of teams to a given location before you perform the final operation, and I would enjoy playing that. But for what Aberration Analyst is, it does a good enough job. It plays a bit into the current analog horror trends, but maintains a distinct vibe and identity that I really enjoyed. Go check it out, and if you do, please share how many times you lost a whole team to an aberration, so I can feel better about my attempts. If you liked this review, consider supporting me financially over at patreon.com/safthesomething. I have over 1,000 demos I'd like to get through, and even a couple dollars goes a long way for me. Patrons get early access to my written reviews, as well as early access to any video versions I make, and exclusive bonus content like my raw gameplay footage.